Today I'm going to show how to create a random rotation in each cell using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. I'm going to start with the polygon example that I showed in a previous video, and I'm going to just decrease the number of cells here. I think I'll try to tighten up those edges a little bit, like that, and then I'll go down to having I guess 3 sides like this, and then this factor controls the number of divisions for the 360 degrees. So if I leave it to 4, it'll be divided into 90 degrees, so each one will be 90 degrees. And if I just bring that up a bit, and then if I bring this up, you can see that each of the triangles has been rotated by a factor of 90 degrees. I could bring this down to 120 degrees, then they're all aligned, or up to 60, so then sometimes they're pointing up, sometimes they're pointing down. Or if I go up to 30 degrees here with 12, then they can go off in all different directions. With 4 sides, I could do 8, so they're all at either square per 45 degrees. So most of the factors in here I've gone over. I just want to go over this part where I add the random rotation. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to take out that part, which is right here. So this is the only code I need to add the random rotation, and currently I found that in this case I could add this phi factor to my arc tangent 2, and that would control a rotation. Okay, and so I could rotate this in different ways to get different effects. But the first idea I might have is to just add some noise to this. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to add noise I of and in this case it's V0, so I want to choose the V0. That's the one that's the fraction is created from, so because I have 2 different coordinate vectors going on here. So add noise V0. If I do that, it doesn't do too much, but that's because it's only going from 0 to 1, and so it's just 1 degree of variation there. But if I add 360 times my noise, okay, now it goes to any value. So I get variation like that. I could change it to a triangle like that, which is okay, but what if I wanted to sort of discretize these so they're only at certain angles? Right now this goes from 0 to 1, the noise value goes from 0 to 1, so if I just take the floor of that, it'll round it off. So if I take the floor of this, it'll round it off between values of 0 and 1. Now the disadvantage of that is, though, that it'll always be 0 because noise only goes between 0 and 1. So I got to multiply it by something. I'm going to multiply it by the C factor here, which has the number of divisions I want to divide my 360 into. So I'll multiply it by C, and I'll divide my 360 by C, and that's all there is to it. So now I can set this, if I have this set to 8, it'll do every 45 degrees. I could have it set to, for this one, if I set it to 4, I don't see anything. But if I set this one to 4, I do see things. And then by the time you get up to 10, it's not a very noticeable effect. 6, I would have to go up to, well, I can see something here with 5 and 7, so the primes, I get an effect on those. But to get this in a sort of an oriented fashion, I would go up to 12. Just like if I had 5, I might try to go up to something like 10, and they sort of you start to see the pattern of their orientation. If it's, I guess, integer multiples of those, look a little better, I guess. Here's a Truchet tiling by Smith, and it looks pretty cool, although it is sort of a one-trick pony, because once you've seen it do this, that's really all it does. But sort of interesting that you can create this and go up and have this like this never-ending sort of maze that you create from that pattern. If I go all the way down to one cell, you can see what it looks like. So there's one cell, and then I just randomly rotate this. This is the equation I used. It starts with a v0, vector 2, x and y times a divided by w. Then I take a fraction, v0 minus 0.5. So that's the same as we usually do, although instead of going directly to a v variable here, set this up as v1. Then I have a theta, the same as before, which is pH plus 360 divided by c times the floor of noise times c. And that applies to the original v0 vector. And once I have now that I have a theta and my v1 vector, I apply a rotation coordinates to those. So I have to do the x cosine of theta minus y sine of theta, and x sine of theta minus plus y cosine of theta, and set up a rotation coordinate, and then I can do the other stuff. I'm going to go over this part in a little more detail too. And so I needed two circles that were sort of quarter circles meeting at the middle of this image, and it turns out that if I have a offset of the v of 0.5 and offset of the length factor of 0.5, it'll make that shape. But I'm going to show what happens if you don't have that. So I'm going to put in, I guess that's b and d, and I'll just put a b in over for this factor and a b in for this factor, and I'll put a d in for this factor and a d in for this one. So this is what I did when I started experimenting around with this, see what happened. And so we're going to give it, okay, just a little bit of an edge. This is very close to the edge here. And this one I'll control the size, and then this one controls the spacing between the two factors. So you could make them overlap, you could move them out. The b factor then is controlling how far apart they are, so I have plus b over here and minus b over there. So that's the separation between the two circles, like that. And then the d factor is still controlling how large they are. So I could make them larger or smaller. Now, it turns out if I set these both to 0.5, I can only approximate it here, but if I bring that up a little, I can tweak it a little better, like that. Then I can control the thickness with this one. Now the next thing is I'm going to, since these are both white on black, I can add them together, and it'll act like a Boolean operation where you're adding this one to this and ORing it with this one, which will make those areas one and get them to show up. And then if I wanted to make it, to get it to be white on black, I'd take 1 minus this. So that's why I have a plus here between these two step functions, so I can get the two separate circles to show up in the picture. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.